everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you. I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas, sharing some stories with you, maybe a couple data points here and there. Does that sound good? All right, so I want to see a show of hands. Who in the room has posted a job, hoping to hire someone, hoping to find good talent, and then nothing? You couldn't find a good person, you couldn't find the right talent. Who in here has faced that at some point? Okay, if you're not raising your hand, you're either tired of raising your hand or you're not telling the truth, because all of us have faced that at some point, right? It's a challenge, and I'm going to talk about that today. So one of my most vivid memories when I started out in recruiting is I was recruiting helicopter instructor pilots. Okay, so it was a really interesting job. I was hoping when the first requisition was given to me, like, give me an admin, give me an accountant, something simple. No, we want you to find an instructor pilot. Okay, sure, why not? I'll figure this thing out as we're going. And over time, I've mastered that role, mastered others, and the hardest job I ever had to fill, there were literally 6 people on the planet who were qualified to do this job. And I was doing everything I could, pulling out every trick, every tactic, every strategy, trying to get someone to accept this role. And so I was talking to these different people, and I realized pretty quickly that just offering them more money wasn't going to work. Right? They were getting all these big offers from other companies larger than us, bigger budgets than us. The money wasn't going to be the thing that swayed them. Ultimately, I realized that, and got one of the people to accept this job, because I found the thing that mattered to him, that he cared about more than anything else in the world. See, he had been the first person in his world to be what he deemed successful. He had a professional job, he had a good career, he had this path, and his family had struggled, had been very poor, had been facing all these challenges before that. And so he saw this as this chance for him to blaze a trail, right? To set a path, to be a pioneer in ways that others had never done. And so when I was appealing to him to take this role, I said, hey, guess what? You'll be the first person to train people in this aircraft. No one's ever done this before. You can set the pace for everybody to follow, and that's what ultimately encouraged him to take that on. In a world where talent scarcity is a real thing, it's hard to find good people, it's difficult to find the right talent, some skills are very, very scarce. We have to look beyond just, okay, let's offer more money. Let's just try to find some other way to get these people in, because it's not as easy as we'd like to think. So you heard all the good things about me. The only thing that's not on this list is I'm a dad of 4 kids. So if I look refreshed here while they're back home, that's why. I'm from the United States in Alabama, and they are 10 hours away from me, sleeping peacefully right now while I'm trying to adjust my body to this time zone, which is great. All right, so I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes some key things around why the talent pool is shrinking and what we can do about it. Some of these things are absolutely outside of our hands. We don't have the control over every one of these levers, but as talent leaders, we have a chance to influence how our companies are approaching talent, how we're seeking them out, and how we are keeping them. The easiest job to fill is the one where you don't lose the person in the first place, right? If we can retain them, we don't have to hire to backfill that role. So there's all these different sorts of reasons. I'm not going to make you guess what all these are. I'm going to walk through a couple of these here in the next few slides and give you some insight into what we're seeing in the data, what we're seeing in the research. I started out my career as an HR leader, as a practitioner, like all of you here, and made my way over to the research side because I wanted to have a chance to impact more leaders, more people than just the employees that were under my responsibility. And so when I started doing the research, I looked for ways to make it very practical, very, very tangible for all of you to understand what to do next and how to make decisions. So a couple of things let's talk about. Number one, birth rates. You didn't expect to come to the HR conference talking about birth rates, and yet here we are. So one slide on this really quickly. So the demographers, the economists, the people who are much smarter than I am that understand how populations grow and shrink, they say that, you know what, if we're going to keep this population at a sustainable level, we have to have 2.3 births per female in a population in order to keep that up. And you can see here the dotted blue line is that 2.3 rate. I've included the US here just as a comparison for you so you understand how far off track we are and have been for some time now. We are under that number. But this period of time looks at how the UAE specifically has steadily trended down until now it is below that replacement rate. Now, you may be here from another country in the Middle East. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be here. But some of those have rates that are above this, that are going to be able to sustain themselves, but many of them are falling below. It's a trend around the world, around the globe. I shared some of this data 2 weeks ago in India. The same kind of thing is happening. So fewer people being born. Today, that doesn't mean anything for us. But into the future, it's going to mean fewer and fewer people available to take on the roles that we need to fill. Not only that, but there's a tremendous number of people who are making very different choices when it comes to work. They're looking for other types of work. They're saying, you know what, with all this pandemic stuff, I've decided I want to stay home and take care of my family first before I do something else. Or I'm going to take a job where I'm working part-time so that I can raise my children, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do later. People are making very different personal choices that are taking them either permanently or temporarily out of the workplace. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any, issues with people doing that. My own wife made that decision. When our fourth child came home, she said, I can't balance all these things anymore. I'm going to stay home until she goes back to school and then figure out what I'm going to do after that. So all these very personal choices, people saying, you know what, I didn't have to commute for a period of time. I'm never going to take a job where I have to commute again. I'm probably the one of them in that bucket. So I was the one when she asked earlier, who wants to work remotely? I was like waving my hand back there because that's me, okay? I don't want to commute anymore. So all these sorts of things are changing and shifting. I'll give you one more. The number of business startups globally is on this accelerating pace. In Dubai alone, 25,000 new companies started up in the first quarter of last year. And that number keeps ticking up over and over again. And that's a sign of a healthy economy, lots of startups, lots of innovation, lots of new companies starting up, which is a great thing. But when you stop and think about it, the people who are starting these jobs are no longer available to take the jobs you have available, right? And at some point, the ones that are successful enough start competing with you for that same talent. So all of these things are contributing to this scarcity when it comes to finding the right people you need to fill your jobs. And I could stop right here and we'd all say, well, darn, it stinks, and we'll just go home. But you want to hear some things that we can do about it? Okay, I'll share some stories with you. I love telling stories. I love finding examples of people who have overcome some of these challenges. So I'll share some different perspectives, some different stories, and some ways that companies are approaching this, both on the hiring side as well as the retention side, to make sure they're keeping their key people. Because in a world where talent is scarce, the right hiring activities, the right retention activities matter more than ever. When there are fewer people to go around, every single person you hire matters more than they did in the past. So let's go through a couple examples of this. So the first one up, we're seeing this trend where companies are saying, we don't want to just hire recent graduates, we want to hire people who are on the other end of the spectrum, people who have a lot of experience, people who have this broad depth of different jobs and responsibilities they've had over their career. We want to tap into that audience and bring those people into our business because they have this maturity, they have this insight, they have these skills that may be difficult to find in other populations. There's an incredible company based in the UK that is an airline, and one of the things they've actually started doing is targeting empty nesters. So when your children move off to college or move out of the house, for many people, that's a strange transition. Like, okay, they reevaluate their life a little bit. So this company is actually saying, hey, you know what? If you are an empty nester, you've recently had this transition, and you've always thought, I want something more, something different, maybe you want to see the world. Come work for us. You can travel. You get to see these different things. They have great employee benefits, so even when you're not working, you get to go to places you want to go. And they're using that as a way to appeal to and target those people to bring them into their organization. They're using that as a way to stand out from other employers. There's a really interesting piece of research from Harvard where they look at what they're calling the hidden workforce. And the hidden workforce are people that most of us don't find. When we post a job, they're not out there looking for jobs. When we go out sourcing and looking on places like LinkedIn and elsewhere, they're not on those places. There's a company that I ran across in the research called Televerde. And Televerde runs call centers, outsourced call centers. They're based in the United States. And if you pick up the phone and you call one of the companies that they're supporting and you're talking to one of the people on the phone, chances are it's going to be a woman. And the chances are that woman is located inside a correctional facility. She's working in a prison, answering the phone, working for this company. So they actually set up their operations, their call centers, in these different penitentiaries around the world, not just North America, but in Europe as well. And they use this as a way to help these women start building skills, so that when it's time for them to finish serving their sentence, they can move on and have some savings, have some skills built up, have some connections built up so they can transition back into life after that. There's not another employer out there that's targeting or thinking about how to hire people like that. But that's a great example of looking for hidden workers that others aren't considering. And one more example for you is hiring back the caregivers. As I said a minute ago, a lot of people have made the decision in the last 2 or 3 years to say, you know what, enough of the rat race. I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'm going to reprioritize my life. I'm going to look at what matters to us. As a family, to me as a person, I'm going to focus on my children potentially, or maybe an aging parent. And so the difficulty with that, though, is an honorable decision, but the difficulty with that is many times caregivers have a hard time transitioning back into the workforce. It's hard to get back into it once you've gotten out of it for a period of time. For whatever reason, there's this stereotype. Employers assume your skills are all outdated, you're not capable, you're not able to make that transition. Even if those are all completely false, they still exist. And so Audible, an Amazon company, has this incredible program they call a returnship. Not an internship, but a returnship, where they actually open up opportunities for people who've been caregivers, who've been out of the workforce for at least a year. And these people get to go through a 16-week paid program. They're developing new skills, they're working on projects, they're building connections with mentors and other people, and allowing them to re-experience work in a kind of low-stakes environment. It's not high pressure, but they're building and refreshing all their skills and getting ready for what's next. And what's amazing is a significant portion of the people who graduate out of this 16-week program get offers to come and work with Audible at the end of that. So they're using this as a way to target these people who many other companies would pass right over and avoid hiring because they've been out of the workplace, they're not current, their skills aren't right, they're not ready for us. They're able to overcome some of those things and bring those people into the workplace. All right, so I'm going to give you 3 examples really quickly on the retention side. So there's some examples on the hiring side. There's a ton of them, lots of them. I'll be giving away some copies of the book at the conference, by the way. I've got a couple in my bag, and I'll be giving away more tomorrow during the master class session that I'll be leading on hiring. But let's talk about some of the retention things that are happening here. I talked about hiring these workers that are more experienced, but other companies are saying, hey, let's find a way to keep them. Let's not just lose them the second they're ready to retire. Right? They're going to run as fast as they can and try to take it easy for the rest of their life. Well, there's a company called Aerospace Corp, and one of the things they've done is actually set up what they call a phased retirement. So when someone hits retirement age, they can retire and the very next day come back to work for them as a contractor. The rules are they can work up to 1,000 hours a year, and some of them work that in 3 months and then take off the next 9 months until the next year starts and they can come back and work some more. Maybe they work a key project or something like that. Others decide to work 2 days a week, keeping their skills current, being able to stay fresh, being able to keep contributing in a meaningful way. But they also get to balance that with more time at home, more time for their children or grandchildren, more time with the things that they care about in their personal pursuits. So they're using this as a way to keep those people connected and engaged so they don't feel like they have nothing left to offer, nothing left to commit back to the workplace. Every time I go looking for a stat around talent shortages, one of the populations that pops up is truck drivers. Driving is a difficult job. Driving is a challenging job. In many cases, it's unsafe. It's just stressful, and people don't want to do it. It's hard to do. I pulled this headline from a Dubai article talking about how even in the country here, where it's difficult to find truck drivers. So I'll give you an example of a company that's doing this really well in the States. A company called Nussbaum Trucking has this incredible approach, and they said, one of the challenges with being a driver, and you can apply this to a lot of different workforce populations, but they said specifically for drivers, your career ladder begins and ends behind the steering wheel, right? You're a driver, and then when you progress and get better at that, you get to drive some more, and then when you're great at it, you get to just drive some more, and there's no further progression like any of us would have where we step up in levels in our career. So they actually put together a certification program and said, hey, we see you as professionals, and we want you to feel like it. And so we're going to give you these metrics to hit. We're going to give you these measurable outcomes, ways that you can progress and grow and develop your career and prove that you are capable in this role. You're a true professional, just like we would recognize anyone else in other types of positions. And I love that example because they're using this. The truck driver turnover in the States, at least, the stats that I have say it's about 75% a year. Imagine 75% of your people quitting your company every year. That's hard to even wrap your mind around. For Nussbaum, the number is about 15% of their people quit every year. So the kinds of things they're doing to retain those critical talent, those critical skills are working, and they give us all some lessons we can use when it comes to our own workplaces. And the last one I'll give you here is retaining the people in the business who are very focused on business and entrepreneurship. So I gave you the stat a minute ago about all these businesses starting up. One of the reasons businesses start up is because someone has a big idea and they have no other outlet at work to expand on that, to use their ideas, to use their creativity and their innovation. They feel like, I have no choice, so I have to go out and start my own thing. Coca-Cola did a really interesting thing a few years ago. They realized they had a really hard time finding talent to show up for some basic types of things, stocking shelves, other types of very simple tasks. And they said, if someone inside the business can figure this out, we will fund it, we will put money behind the idea because this is a problem we have as a company. And a pair of individuals there, one of them working on the marketing team, one in the operations team, said, we have an idea for an app that would allow you to push a button and someone shows up able to do this task. They're able to work this number of hours. It handles all the paying them, everything else. You just hit the button when you need someone. And Coca-Cola funded this idea, funded this operation. It became a separate company now. It spun out eventually. It was so successful, but their first customer was Coca-Cola after they spun out because they used this as a way to keep the ideas, to keep the value those innovators were creating inside the business and benefit from that instead of them going out and starting their own thing and losing all the creativity they brought to the table. And we've already heard ChatGPT mentioned here from the stage at least once. It'll probably be mentioned more than once before the end of the day is over with. But things like that are changing work. The automation piece of this conversation changes the types of jobs that are available, the types of work that we are doing as HR and talent practitioners. All of those things are influenced by some of the AI, the automation, and I don't have time to go into all that fun stuff today. But if you want to chat, catch me in the hallway. I'd love to chat about that with you, about some of the things we're seeing in our research. Really quickly, I mentioned this already, but this is based on, the conversation today is based on the new book, just came out a few weeks ago, hit the #1 bestseller for HR books on Amazon, because it's a conversation that every business leader has had. Like, where are the people? How do we find good workers? How do we find good talent? And so if you want the first chapter of that book, you can download it for free, talentscarcity.com. You're welcome to do that. And I'm going to close with this. So in the last few years, HR, my friends, my colleagues, my peers that I talk to in the space have said it's the hardest it has ever been. It's always been a challenging job, but in the last few years it's been harder than ever. Higher expectations from the workforce, higher expectations from leaders outside in the C-suite who are expecting you to do more, to achieve more, to be more than you possibly can be. And the difficulty that I've had is I've seen different campaigns where people talk about, hey, you know what, let's celebrate frontline workers, let's celebrate the nurses, let's celebrate the healthcare professionals and all these other people who are doing these things in the middle of this difficult pandemic, everything else. And every time I saw one of those messages, I said, yes, thank you, absolutely. But also thank you to the people who never get applause, who are hiring them, who are paying them, who are training them, people who are doing, I see that back there. I see you clapping over there, yes, absolutely. Thank you to all of you for doing that kind of work. Right? You don't get celebrated, you don't get applause, and yet it's noteworthy, it's valuable, it's adding value, not just for the business, but for every single person you're serving, every single candidate you're giving a little bit extra kindness to, every single employee you're listening to the challenges they have and trying to find a way to solve those. You are making an impact, and if you ever forget that, just flash back to this moment here where I said, thank you very much for your time.